Which deceased person, if brought back to life, would be the most surprised to learn they became famous posthumously? Niels Henrik Abel, mathematician completely unknown in his lifetime, died at age 26 of tuberculosis. Then his mathematical work was discovered, which put him near the top rank of mathematicians ever. When Norway raised a statue of him, they put it on a tall column because nobody knows what he looked like. Similarly, Everest Galois died age 21. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/everest_Galois. Alfred Wegener, who invented tectonic plate theory. No one believed him until long after he was dead. There were so many elementary school students that recognized how NW Africa would fit nicely between N and S America. The poet John Keats, who died at 25, convinced he'd been robbed of a chance to make a significant contribution to English literature. His gravestone literally reads, "Here lies one whose name was writ in water." Most of what I know of Keats comes from the Hyperion Cantos book series, but it sounds like Keats got dealt a pretty shitty hand in life. Elizabeth Short, posthumously known as the Black Dahlia. Even people who do not know much about true crime always still seem to know her name. This question got me thinking about all the people that would be surprised at how much notoriety they got from disappearing or being murdered. Story. Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick, he was considered an unsuccessful writer while he was alive. He only managed to sell about 3,000 copies of Moby Dick in his time. Now it's one of the most well-known classics. Emily Dickinson, Edgar Allan Poe, Sylvia Plath, Franz Kafka. There'd be a lot of shocked writers on this list. He achieved some fame for Typee and Amu. His shift in subject matter and style in Moby Dick baffled his contemporaries. Vincent van Gogh, definitely. He just wanted to sell and make his art his whole life. He died without having that. I'm pretty sure he died dirt poor. His grandson made him famous. It was his dream to be famous for his art, and he'll never know because he died before it happened. It was his brother's wife and son who made him famous, actually. But yeah, it's incredibly tragic that so many artists who are practically worshipped now died without knowing people appreciated their work. That's fucking tragic, honestly. I mean, you take any composer, writer or painter from centuries ago and they will be surprised. During their life they could have been next to royalty, but to imagine that you are celebrated even after hundreds of years, it's not something easy to wrap your head around, I imagine. So it would be cool to say anyone very respected, like Beethoven, Cervantes or Goya. To know that everyone considers you the best of the best, even after the rotting time, might blow your mind. I feel like of all people, Beethoven would be the least surprised. However, anyone before him would be severely surprised because it was a tradition to lose all fame once you died, since nobody would play your music. Beethoven's death started the movement of people playing and conducting dead people's music, and he was worshipped like the next Jesus sometimes. That Roman in Pompeii who died while masturbating. That's the way I want to go out. Turns out, that probably isn't what happened, sad face. https://www.bbc.co.uk/BBC3/article/DFC9CF4-137B-440F-4D. Alan Turing. This is a great answer. His achievements were supposed to be top secret. I was amazed when I realized that one of the greatest contribution to society, that I looked at every day, was a top secret. Joseph Merrick, otherwise known as the Elephant Man. I think he would be surprised about how many plays, books and even had a movie made about him. Edit. Wow, thank you guys for silver, and yes, I know that Joseph Merrick was famous in time, but I think that he'd be surprised that he's even more famous, but also that today's time he would be more accepted. I think people of this generation would be more supportive of him in general. Poor guy was treated harshly throughout his lifetime. Ignaz Semmelweis faced ruin because of his insistence on aseptic technique, handwashing. He would probably wake up and have a heart attack if he found out how important his methods are today. Otzi the Iceman. It's the earliest surviving naturally mummified human remains, at about 5,000 years old. It would take a while to explain the concept of fame to him first. I remember reading about this in a standardized reading test in 4th grade. It was so interesting that I read it a bunch of times and almost ran out of time to finish the section LMAO edit. Since lots of people are asking, I am also 19. People tell stories of others since we have language. I think he would know what fame is, of course not in this magnitude. I think Shakespeare would be floored if he knew his works were still being taught and read. Seriously, you guys read my plays that are meant to be watched. What, you egg? Still being taught and read, that's not even doing it justice. Every high school graduate in America has read at least a few phrases, if not multiple poems and plays by Shakespeare. Whole classes are taught just on him. People dedicate their lives to just his works. He is likely the most well-known playwright of all time. Rasputin would be proud and confused. Especially if he heard the song and fanfictions written about him. Fanfictions? You know what, I won't even ask. Rah rah Rasputin. I'm torn between Poe and Lovecraft. Both were spectacularly unsuccessful in life, if you go by wealth and fame. It's challenging for a modern reader to grasp how utterly obscure Lovecraft was when he died. Despite Dolph's many faults, he must be given credit for having started the old gentleman's posthumous career by founding Arkham House. And it's difficult to read about Poe's last days without pangs of sympathy. There's mordant amusement in contemplating how Rufus Griswold is now remembered only for trying to bury Poe's reputation with his corpse. Poe was pretty well known at the time of his death. The Raven was immensely popular and he was making good money on the lecture circuit and doing live readings at the time of his death. He would probably be more surprised by the dark, maniacal image or himself cultivated by Griswold. Anne Frank. They published my diary, and it's been read by millions of people. Anne Frank actually rewrote large parts of her diary with the intention of having them published after coming out of hiding. But of course, she's much more famous because, you know, she didn't come out of hiding. Henrietta Lacks. Story. Edward Teach aka Blackbeard. Dude was a pirate for a few years. He had some reputation, but he wasn't exactly out there for decades doing pirate stuff, and well, he was just another outlaw. Don't think he'd see pirates being romanticized like this coming, or him being the face of old-timey pirates in general. Blackbeards here and HES taking a shit. He'd be surprised by his long-lasting legacy, but dude, he was fucking famous in his time. A General History of the Pirates, written just after his death, was a bestseller. Besides, you don't get called El Gran Diablo by the Spanish authorities and blockade Charleston Harbor for 6 days and somehow not end up famous. Franz Kafka. He had no faith in his work, and his will stated the executor of it to destroy them all. Other guy went against these wishes and published. Wow, you really earned that username. That was so hard. I was going to say something until I saw it. Got me. That's so Kafkaesque. Kashim. He was likely just some middle-rank accountant or something like that, and now his name is remembered when those of kings and priests and warlords and whatnot from his time are all forgotten. Just like Erastus, the director of public works from Romans chapter 16 verse 23. He was mentioned in a list of people sending their greetings, but became famous when someone found his name carved in a public work. To go the opposite way, I've always thought the ancient Roman emperors like Julius Caesar would be embarrassed at how small their once great empire now is. At its height under Trajan's rule, the empire spanned a greater distance than the modern United States, and now the empire is completely dissolved and their descendants are relegated back to the peninsula. If I were a Roman emperor, I would be proud to know that the Roman state, monarchy, republic, empire, Byzantium, lasted for more than 2,000 years. I would be fine with Italy just being a regular nation, knowing that Latin languages are spoken everywhere and that Roman culture is dominant over the entire Western Hemisphere. Vincent van Gogh. The dude was severely depressed his whole life and only sold one painting while alive. He eventually killed himself only for his art to be worth millions now. I lived in Amsterdam for a few years and always wondered what Van Gogh would make of the mobs of tourists at the museum dedicated solely to his work. Especially because more visit that museum than the Rijksmuseum next door with countless Rembrandts and Vermeers and other Dutch master works. If you look into his death, though, the only evidence that he killed himself was that he said he did, and all of the other evidence points to the fact that someone else killed him, and he was trying to defend them. Nostradamus. He wouldn't have seen it coming, that's for sure. Emmett Till. He's not famous enough for the price he paid, sadly. This should be higher on the list though. The way he was treated as a human is what made him well known. Emmett Till probably just wanted to live an undiscriminated, fulfilling life like most people I know, no matter what color they are. Unfortunately, it was the way he died that made him famous, so he probably wouldn't have any guess fame was coming as it was happening. I think some of these people may have been able to guess they'd be famous after the art they created and left behind. Most of the people listed here got some chance at life and creating something. Most of them probably wanted some level of fame. Emmett Till became the face of a movement against lynching and racism because of how he died. We must not forget. May he rest in power. Jon Snow. No, Drive. Jon Snow, look it up. He was the chief pioneer of the germ theory of medicine and considered the founder of epidemiology, as well as the person who proved that cholera spreads through water, particularly because of the Broad Street Pump incident. His findings and reports were heavily scrutinized all his life, and he was dismissed as a nut and conspiracy theorist. Insert, you know nothing, Jon Snow. Joke here, but those very same reports and investigations are the main reason modern cities have sewers under them. See also Ignaz Semmelweis, proponent of the "doctors wash your damn hands and mothers won't die in childbirth" theory. He was so shunned that he ended up in a mental hospital and died after being beaten by orderlies. Deleted. I wonder what he would say about all the cheesy inspirational quotes that the internet falsely attributes to him. Rosalind Franklin. Not even Watson and Crick truly recognized the importance of her work in her lifetime. Now the first thing you're taught in any genetics class is that it was her picture that helped them figure it out. Edit. I think she'd be surprised to learn she's famous now because she was completely overshadowed and unrecognized in her life, not because I believe she didn't know what she was doing was important. Diogenes, because as far as I know, the man never aspired to fame. He was just an asshole who lived in an urn in the market square, never bathed, masturbated publicly, and occasionally started shit with the local philosophical community. His claims to fame are 1. Lobbing a plucked chicken at Aristotle because he thought his definition of what man is was too reductive, and 2. Cussing out Alexander the Great for standing in his sunlight. He may be shocked to learn, first of all, what the internet is, and second that he's basically its patron saint, deity, the father of shitposting. Then again, he may not care. Edit. I realize it's Plato not Aristotle, but I made the mistake and I need to be reminded of it so I won't make it again. Except he was famous though. That's the thing, even Alexander the Great knew about him and was into teachings. He was pretty hot shit. And the chicken thing was with Plato, not Aristotle, plus I'm pretty sure he didn't throw a chicken at him. He plucked a chicken, interrupted him teaching and said something along the lines of "Behold Plato's man." Then again, he may not care. He would fling shit at us, most likely. J.S. Bach. He was known as a prodigious organist in his time and composed as sort of a side gig. His music was decently appreciated in his time, but as soon as he died he was completely forgotten, as he expected. It wasn't until Mendelssohn resurrected his works in the 1800s that anyone cared for his music, and now he is seen as possibly the greatest composer of all time. He wasn't quite forgotten. His works were well known, revered, and quoted in works by Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, and composers with a keyboard background. His music style in counterpoint even became the foundation of Western music theory that is still taught to this day, which would definitely be a surprise to him. Imagine your works defining a way of thinking across civilizations for the next centuries. But Mendelssohn did reintroduce the Bach works to a wider audience outside of the music circles. Stieg Larsson, who wrote The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. He was a dedicated, talented writer who, in life, never found great success. He became a best-selling author many times after his death. Archduke Ferdinand. They start at what? He was heir to one of the most powerful empires in the world. I don't think he'd be surprised to learn he was famous. Deleted. No, his art teacher. Franz Kafka. I told Max to burn my unpublished stories, not publish them. Anastasia. The most famous Romanov, and she was a young teenage girl who actually did nothing of note in her life while her sisters, parents and brother were more famous in their time. Deleted. He may have spent the latter part of his life alone and in relative obscurity, but in his heyday he was huge, well-known and even a bit of a charming socialite when it came to garnering support for his ideas, ventures. In fact, his income in his older years was pretty much entirely donations from friends and former business partners. I think he was well aware of the massive impact his work had achieved for the entire human race. So I don't think he would be surprised, he just wouldn't care. Van Gogh, I guess. He is an everyday name these days. He would be proud and shocked to see his influence. That dude's dead wife. Why does everyone want to have sex with me? What the hell happened? Ignaz Semmelweis. He pioneered the idea that hand-washing saves lives, and was the source of the name of the Semmelweis reflex, which is the tendency to reject new evidence or knowledge that contradicts established norms. Because his idea was soundly rejected until after he died. Robert Johnson and his impact on music. Gregor Mendel. His published works related to heredity were almost completely ignored until they were rediscovered about 3 decades later. Lizzie Borden's parents, either of them,